Hello everyone, welcome to SEO's channel. I'm Gauri Kashyap and today I'm honored on this special day to be joined by Justice Indira Banerjee, former judge of the Supreme Court. Ma'am, thank you for joining us today. We'd just like to ask you a few questions, some reminiscing your time at the Supreme Court, some perhaps commenting on the Supreme Court like observers like us, and perhaps some as your experience as a woman in the legal profession. So first off, your journey in the legal system began in 1985.
Yes.
And could you tell us a little bit about what it was like to be a young woman lawyer in the courts back then?
Getting a chamber, getting a senior to mentor you was difficult. But I was lucky to get a very good senior who was very supportive, Mr. Shomaraditya Pal. But before that, I had been to at least 4 chambers, 4 seniors who said they didn't take ladies in their chamber. This was one. Secondly, sexist jokes,
Okay.
remarks. I remember a slightly senior solicitor commenting, "Oh, you've come to the profession when you get a blasting from the judge, you'll run to get married.
Oh.
You'll get married and run away." So I said, let's see. So
And here you are.
I jokingly told him, I didn't blast you. I could have.
Since then, ma'am, 37 years later, how do you see the court has changed?
A lot has changed because there are many more women in the profession. There are many more judges. But there should be greater change.
So during your time at the Supreme Court, I think you saw one of the world's biggest crises in recent times. You were there when the Supreme Court was working its way through the COVID crisis. In many ways, the Supreme Court's functioning was halted, and in many ways it was forced to adapt. Could you share some experiences from your time there as a judge?
There was technical upgradation almost overnight, and we started taking up cases online. There were lesser number of benches. In fact, just before the COVID pandemic set in, I had started to preside over a bench. But after the COVID pandemic set in, I again became the second judge, third judge
Okay.
in a bench because we used to have only 5 or 6 benches.
And what were some of the bigger challenges at that time?
I had some idea of computers. So it was not that much of a challenge, but yes, I had a PA. She had a small child. Before the pandemic started, she used to leave her child in the creche. After the pandemic started, the creche closed, and under the rules, children were not allowed to be taken out at all. Now you can't leave a child alone. So sometimes she had to stay back at home. Sometimes her husband had to stay back at home. So that was impacting my work. And I thought I had to cooperate and help her out. Even though my work was piling up and I was facing difficulty.
During that time, before COVID-19 struck, pendency was at about 59,000 cases. And by the time the court regained its complete functioning by about 2021, pendency had increased by over 10,000 cases. And this is not just a COVID related issue, right? Over the years, we've had a astronomical increase. What can the court do, realistically speaking?
The courts have to be a little strict to weed out frivolous litigation. And the statistics are not always a very clear reflection.
What are we missing?
I'll tell you the reason. Just after my elevation to the High Court, I was on the division bench. And every Friday, the division bench used to take up Pathar cases. So I used to be given a single bench. And probably because I was newly elevated, they used to give me old cases. And I found most of these cases had become infructuous, either because there was a decision one way or the other by the Supreme Court, or there were a whole lot of matters which had to be transferred to the land tribunal because of the change in law, administrative tribunal matters which were still there in the High Court. So I used to take up these matters and I used to dismiss. And if there were matters which had to be transferred to the tribunal, I used to pass orders straight away for transfer. So one day, a senior colleague of mine told me, Indra, you're dismissing these matters on the first day itself. So I said, I've told the bar that if they come and mention before me, I'll restore it immediately. In this 14 and a half years that I was in the Calcutta High Court, no one came back to mention those matters. When I was taking up these matters, my Chief Justice, Justice Ashok Mathur, said that I had very good disposal figures. I smiled and I said I only buried the dead.
Right.
So, statistics in itself,
It's a
and
two-way
it is
street.
also important that we sometimes save the dying rather than dispose the dead.
So it's a two-part system. One is at entry there is frivolous petition, and perhaps at disposal, no matter what judges do, it's this entry clogging that messes up the system.
Law changes. There is a decision of a higher court.
Right.
Now, you should probably have a case management setup comprising of some lawyers also, who would earmark such cases which have become infructuous so that they can just be thrown out of the list. The registry can do some weeding out provided the lawyers cooperate. Otherwise, they go by the numbers, the case. It may not be possible for them to know. There are other things which have been controlled. Once upon a time, they used to have multiple petitions without disclosing that the petition had already been disposed of. But now with computerization, one can just log in and see the result of the case. So if there's an order, if it has already been disposed of matter won't come in the list again. I can tell you what I did in the High Court. Get similar matters grouped and get them disposed of together. And here on one occasion, I remember my court master came to me. This was a batch of income tax matters in which certain provisions of the Income Tax Act with regard to settlement of disputes was under challenge. The matter was argued by one of the senior most counsel. The additional Solicitor General gave his response. Then the counsel for the petitioner said he had a constitutional matter in the Supreme Court, so he wanted some time. I gave the time. My courtmaster came and said, "My lord, release these matters from your list." So I said, "Why?" So he hesitated a little and he said, "My lord, you're heading the list of parterres because of these matters, because there were a batch of 65 matters and all of them were coming as parterre." So I said, "It doesn't matter, Sharaj Babu." After a few days, the matter was disposed of. So I called Sharaj Babu and I said, "Sharaj Babu, aren't you very happy?" So he was a bit taken aback. I said, "You were concerned about the parterre matters, that this court was listing the head of parterre matters. Heading the list of parterre matters. Aren't you happy now? This court is heading the list of disposed of matters." Yes, he smiled. I said, "Don't smile, it's only one judgment." It's only one judgment, one point of law. Just that 65 matters were tagged together. So if you group the matters, then you can have all the matters disposed of. But when you have them separately, then you have to hear them again and again, then they may go to different benches, they may be conflicting decisions. So these are things which have to be done. But then the judiciary also has a problem. And that problem is, what happens when you go to a hospital? If it is a hospital with 400 beds, they'll take 400 patients. Maybe they'll take another 15 patients and accommodate them on the floor or in the corridor because they're critical patients. After that, they'll say, sorry, we can't do anything about this. But so far as the judiciary is concerned, the gates of the judiciary are always open.
Part of this is the increasing number of special leave petitions that are filed. Some commentators say that it's taking away the role of the Supreme Court as the constitutional court and is not getting to hear as many.
Priority should definitely be given to pending constitutional cases which have to be decided by the constitutional court.
You were part of many constitution bench cases yourself,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes.
Do you find that the court hearing constitution bench cases takes away its time to do other things and tackle this massive pile of pendency? Many people find that because constitution bench cases happen, it takes away 4 or 5 judges at a time, or 9 judges or 11 judges at a time, which means they can't clear the many division bench cases that are pending. It's a time allocation question.
No, the Supreme Court's primary duty is to decide cases of constitutional importance. So constitutional cases have to be decided. They should not be unnecessarily prolonged. But if it requires hearing, that has to be done. And once a constitutional a case is disposed of by the Constitution bench, many other matters will get
Many
disposed
tag matters, like you said, yes. Um, during your tenure at the Supreme Court, you saw 5 Chief Justices, and we've seen that depending on the changing of the Chief Justice, the tone and tenor of the court change. Some are media friendly, some are not. Some kinds of cases get heard, some do not. How do you view the role of the Chief Justice in setting a tone for the court, both public eye and how the public sees the court, but also its own
No.
functioning?
When I was elevated, Justice Deepak Mishra was the Chief Justice. I was elevated on 7th August. He retired on 3rd or 4th September, so I hardly got him as Chief Justice for 2 months. The next one was Justice Gogoi. Okay, he was all right as a Chief Justice, quite strict. Next came Justice Bobde. It was the COVID period.
Yeah.
So, after Justice Bobde came Justice Ramanna. Justice Uday Lalit, when he was the Chief Justice, he set up many constitutional benches.
25 he put together.
But I could not do all of them because my brother judges did not agree, because they felt they had other more important matters which had to be disposed of. Obviously, the Chief Justice is the head of the institution. So his image, whatever image he creates, reflects upon the judiciary in a big way.
The Supreme Court Observer, we had previously had an opportunity to speak to Justice B.V. Nagaratna, and particularly about what the court can do institutionally to improve the quality of women lawyers and women judges in the court. And she had said some institutional changes, such as building a creche or having those kind of accesses, were important, and also
One is
family
fresh,
support.
even training. You can even have training of lawyers, training of trainers. There are many lawyers who may not be very proficient in English, but proceedings are conducted in English. So maybe you can have an English class for them, a spoken English class, which might help them. Then you can have sessions on advocacy. I remember Priya Hingorani. She used to conduct these training sessions for lawyers in different high courts in the country, but unfortunately they do not always get the right kind of support.
So capacity building for women.
Capacity building. You can also evolve some system where some financial assistance is given to students, to women from the lower
Marginalized
economic
community.
strata, to enable them to kind of continue, to kind of pull on. But very often, many things which we say cannot be implemented. It is difficult to implement because one of the Chief Justices had perhaps said that the junior lawyers should be paid and paid a minimum amount. On principle, there can be no quarrel with this proposition that the juniors should be paid. But how are you going to enforce it? I, Indira Banerjee, am a lawyer. I am not going to select through a competitive process. After this interview, I'm impressed with you. You come to my chamber, I'll say I'll certainly take you. I'm not that impressed with her. I will say I won't take her. Can you force me to take a junior in my chamber? It also depends on my income. It depends on my capacity. There are so many lawyers who approach me saying that they want to be my law clerk, law assistant. But I don't have a proper office in that sense. I have a residential office. Where do I give them the place to sit? If I don't know what I'm going to earn the next month, how will I make a commitment to pay a certain amount for the next 1 year? So it's all very fine. The established lawyers, maybe the Mukul Rohatgis, the Kapil Sibbals, the Abhishek Manu Singhis, they may be in a position to keep a lot of juniors and pay them well. But a lawyer who's not sure of his own income, how will he get into this commitment? And then how do you estimate your future income? Present, past, yes. Things may change tomorrow because of a health issue. So, what will the lawyer do if I am going to keep one junior and there is a person from a weaker economic section, someone who is not proficient in English, and someone else who's from a good school, good at English, who will be able to correct my drafts? I'll get proper assistance. I will lean towards that lawyer. You have to achieve a certain level of competence. Some attempts may be made to ensure that public sector undertakings engage women lawyers, empanel women lawyers.
Recent data shows us that about only 15% of nearly 1.8 million people who join the legal profession are women. So on this occasion of International Women's Day, could you give our viewers a message, especially our young women viewers, a message?
I would advise them to come to the legal profession in larger numbers, to work hard, prove their competence, their worth through their performance, and there is always room at the top. You need patience. They used to say law is a jealous mistress. So you can't take up law as a part-time profession. You can't say I'll go to the disco every evening and I'll be a lawyer. You can't say that I'm going to have my fun, I'm going to enjoy life and I'm going to be a lawyer, because then you'll slip back. And at the end of the day, some opportunity, one or two opportunities may be given, but you have to seize the opportunity to show that you are capable. If you are good, if you are doing well, work will come, people will come, firms will want to engage you.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
I told you a little while ago, if you get any benefit as a woman, that's good, but don't expect it. Excel. And women are excelling. You'll be happy to know that in many states, more than 60%, in one case even 70% of the successful candidates in a judicial service examination were women. The reasons are socio-economic. Women have to take time out when they get married, their social obligations and commitments, maternity leave, childcare leave, 101 rules.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I won't take more of your time. But thank you for sitting down with us today and for speaking with our viewers and us. So thank you once again. That
Thank
was the
you.
Supreme Court Observer. Thank you all for watching.